paying for a lot of people to go to college. It means that you can't have libertarians in college that much anymore because the colleges have just become, they become like baby birds waiting for the state to bring its big giant worm of taxpayer money and stuff it down their gullets, right? I mean, they've expanded, they paid themselves. They're so far away from the market now that the idea that you'd have a market-driven faculty is, maybe outside of a few places, economics departments here and there.
Right.
But
so I guess the answer to your question.
So what I'm saying, they're red-pilled way earlier than you are, and they're in a much more hostile environment than we were.
Right. So am I equipped to help them deal with that? I would say not yet, but I'm working on it. I think it's going to take some practice. I don't see any other way. And they can just be...
Well, no, I'm not saying there is another way. I just think that you might want to mull over what your life would have been like if you got red-pilled at the age of your kids.
I see. Okay.
Right. I mean, I didn't get red-pilled, really. I mean, I got objectivist in my teens.
Mm-hmm.
But you can kind of slither through as an objectivist, the anarchist and the knowing some facts about race and IQ and I mean, like, oh my God, plus men's rights and peaceful parenting and the voluntary family. I mean, these weren't things that I had much thought or paid much attention to or really even crossed my mind when I was younger. And if I were sort of to go back in time and be starting in my sort of early to mid-teens with the facts that I have now, I can't imagine.
That would have been a big mind bend. I didn't have any of that either.
Right.
I mean, like I mentioned, libertarianism, so I got into that in university, but after, before that, it was not a whole lot of PC out there.
Yeah, but and libertarianism is, at least in the States, is relatively respected insofar as you're not just plain evil for even thinking about it. At least when I was a kid. Like, I could be an objectivist and people would have big arguments against me, and I'd get why don't you care about the poor, and stuff like that. But it wasn't this rancid, bottomless leftist hatred that is out there now. That is, I mean, God. Like, I honestly, I can't imagine. When I was going to college, like, I cannot imagine any group forcing the resignation of the chancellor or the dean. I can't imagine riots. I can't imagine violent protests. I can't even imagine sit-ins. I mean, maybe, the 80s and 90s were, I guess they were a particularly calm period in academia for I don't even know what reasons, but I can't imagine the volatility of the environment now is quite something. And if they're into the sciences and so on, that'll be better, right? I mean, Noam Chomsky talked about how in the sciences at least there's some facts. It's not just all opinions, and which does not speak much to the arts, but.
Right.
But in terms of sexual market value, what do you think it's going to do? And, I know it's a weird thing to think about with your kids, but, you've got sons entering into their teenage years. What's it going to be like if they get red-pilled on male-female relations, male disposability, and so on? What's it going to be like for their sexual market value?
Well, it's going to certainly be interesting. If they go to college, what the percentage of women in college is 55, 60%, depending on the college. So it's the opposite of when I was at school. It was 60% or more males. So, and
yeah, it's still the same number of smart men and women, though. It's just there more of the others, more of the other kind.
Well, it's not only that. There's people flaming you out on Facebook or Twitter or all this stuff. So I didn't have any of that. There's this instant, you make one mistake and everyone knows, and you can't erase it. It's on the internet forever. It's a tougher environment. They've got to tread carefully.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing
it's funny how
going over my brain.
The internet has both brought our capacity for free speech and completely strangled our capacity for free speech at the same time. I mean, it's a real double-edged sword when it comes to human self-expression. But I think that people are underestimating how big a fight is coming.
And I think part of the dream is I'm so angry that, I'm not going to be able to, have a society that what's better for my kids than when I had it. I think it's going to be worse. You like to see progression and leave the world a little better place, but
Oh no, it's
it's
worse. Yeah,
going in the
no,
wrong
it's worse.
direction. So that's also
Yeah, I
part of
mean,
the
the
anger.
technology has made things better in a lot of ways, but as far as the debt goes, and I mean, it's terrible. And the other thing too is that one of the reasons, right, that a big topic. I'll just try and touch on it briefly. But I mean, I read a lot about Ayn Rand's. She wrote a lot of articles about the student unrest and the riots and all that in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And, she was pretty old school law and order kind of person. And she was, and Ronald Reagan was in charge. Like he was governor of California when a lot of these riots were going on. He just called in the National Guard and put the riots down. It's like, that's what you have to do. If there's a riot, you call in the National Guard, you put the riot down. And that's what stops it. There's no other way to stop it. But what happened was America in the 60s was fighting communism, and communism kept talking about how racist America was, because that's what communists and socialists do, is they race bait to destroy the free market.
Right.
And America is so painfully sensitive about its international reputation that the idea, like let's say that there are a bunch of minorities who are rioting, and they put the riots down, which... if you're simply interested in the calculus of saving lives, then you put the riots down. Again, I'm not talking about the morality of the situation.
Right.
I'm simply talking about the practicality of the situation, that you go in hard and you shut the riots down right away using whatever force necessary. And that way you save entire neighborhoods, you save entire lives, you save hundreds, if not thousands of lives, and you save entire cities. I mean, if the riots in Detroit had been put down right away in the 1960s, Detroit would not be a decaying crap heap populated by herds of dangerous wild dogs at the moment. Right?
Right.
Yeah. The sort of slow decay is something that people seem willing to accept. If they call in the National Guard and they put down the riot and maybe a couple of people get killed, well, how many people have suffered and died as a result of the descent into godforsaken lawlessness and criminality that has happened to a lot of American inner cities after the tax-paying population left? Like, they have, for every life that they saved by not putting the riots down, they have spent 1,000 more as a result of that indecision. And again, I'm not talking about the ethics in terms of abstract non-aggression principle and freezes. I'm simply talking about the practical calculus of actually saving people's lives,
Right.
of actually helping people. If you don't put the riots down, the city dies. The city dies. Because the taxpayers all leave. And when the city dies, many more people suffer and die than ever could have suffered or died as a result of putting down the riots. And when you put down the riots, at least you're acting against people who are instigating the riots. Right? So it's the people at least who have some agency in the riots. You're acting against them. But when the city dies, I mean, 4-year-olds get killed in drive-by shootings. They're not responsible. The people who are actually starting the riots, well, at least they have some agency in the matter. And so the longer this is deferred, the worse it's going to be. And it's been deferred a long time. And Reagan, basically was saying to the people who did not put down the riots, and the riots escalated. They didn't put down the riots escalated. And he said, well, you should have grabbed them by the scruff of their neck and thrown them off campus the moment they rioted. You march them off campus, you revoke their student membership. Nope, just no. We're not doing violence. We're not doing rock throwing. And this is not how this is not how a civilization resolves its disputes. And he said, you should have just grabbed them by the scruff of the neck and thrown them off campus right away. He didn't talk about shooting people, right? But
Right.
the longer this lawlessness continues, the worse it's going to be. And then, of course, America is terrified, that around the world there'll be pictures of National Guard and shooting at people or trying to put down riots and it's going to be really bad PR. And then you'll get whiny, nasally Neil Young whining about it forever and ever. And again, I'm simply talking about the practical reality that when people start using violence in a free society, I'll tell you this, if people start throwing rocks at other people, they start throwing garbage cans through plate glass windows, I'm telling you, a free society would deal with that pretty damn quickly. And they would rather have Detroit die than put down a riot. That is so insane on so many levels. And the death of Detroit, and there are, of course, lots of other cities. Yeah, Ferguson used to be a nice town. This is when massive amounts of resources are being pumped in the forms of welfare and government employment and subsidies and all of that, and Obamacare and so on. When that all runs out, wow, the amount of suffering and death that will occur will be beyond imagination. It's, if it's not treated decisively, it literally will become a civil war.
Wow.
And we don't want that.
No, we don't.
So, I don't know. Your dream is, I think, saying that it's not going to be as peaceful as you might want it to be.
That's for damn sure.
Now, I will say that your sons will be protected. Your sons will be protected because as case-elected, rational, red pill people, they will be shunned by the most dangerous elements in society around women as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And knowing the dangers of female sexuality plus the current witch hunt for testicles going on, in particular on campuses, that is going to be very helpful for them to know, I think. And so they are protected, but at the same time, okay, last sort of little thing I'll mention, which is this: the choice to be a parasite. And I'm not just talking about the poor, the rich, military-industrial complex, and all that, subsidies and all that. I mean, the rich do it too. But if you choose to be a parasite and you die before your host does, you've made a great decision. Because you've had a relatively easy life. You got a lot of resources without having to work hard for them. And, particularly for lower IQ people, it's a pretty sweet gig. Now, if, on the other hand, you decide to be a parasite, or maybe you're raised that way or whatever, right? But there's enough information out there on the internet that people know what the alternatives are now. But let's say you are a parasite and you don't outlive your host. Well, that is a very, very bad situation to be in. It's if you bet your house double or nothing, you either end up with two houses or no house at all. And the gamble that the dependent classes make on the continuation of government cheddar is a very risky one. And if they roll double sixes and they get the government prints more money and they threaten riots and the whatever, right? And well, then and they continue to get it and then they die of old age. It's like, yeah, good call from a sort of amoral practical standpoint. On the other hand, if they're sort of 40 or 50 years old and they don't really have any job skills or job experience, and then the government runs out of money, it's like, oh dear. Oh, you did not make a good decision there, my friend. And I think we're close to that. I really do. I think we're close. And I think that I think certainly if Hillary gets in,
mm-hmm.
I think Bernie Sanders is feel the burnout. I think he's done. But if you get a real leftist coming in, they can run out of money. Now, the argument could be made that you need leftists to put down riots. And they will, but they'll do it much more brutally than the people on the right will do. But I think, I really do think that the government is close to running out of money.
Can't go on forever. I mean,